Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that invites you into discussions taking place in your community on today's local and global issues. Now, your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, the Dean and Academic Vice President of the college, Michael Marsden.
Good evening, my name is Michael Marsden, and I'm your host for this edition of Conversations from St. Norbert College. Our special guest this evening is Dr. John Perkins, civil rights statesman and president of the John M. Perkins Foundation for Reconciliation and Development in Jackson, Mississippi. Dr. Perkins is one of the leading evangelical voices to come out of the American civil rights movement and is an internationally known author, speaker, and teacher on issues of racial reconciliation and Christian community development. He's the author of 10 books and has received an equal number of honorary degrees and has served on nearly 20 boards, including World Vision and the National Association of Evangelicals. Our topic this evening is Christianity and social justice. Dr. Perkins, we're delighted to have you on campus and on this program as our guest.
Well, I'm really honored to be here and to be a part of this, the history of this college, and to learn about it. So it's a real honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about why you left Mississippi at the age of 17, and then in 1960 you came back to Mississippi.
Well, my mother died when I was 7 months old. My father couldn't read or write, dropped us off, the five of us. I was 7 months old at his mother's house, and he left, and so I grew up there. She gave away, with so many kids, she gave away 3 of them. She kept my oldest brother because he was old enough to work on the plantation, and because I was sick and was a baby, and we grew very close together.
Your brother?
The two brothers and I. And then after World War, he went into the war, World War II, and came back and was home for about 6 months, and he was killed in a racial incident in our town. And that
was a town marshal?
By the town marshal. And that was back in the days when blacks was really migrating. They was migrating up north, but then those who had been away in the service, they was migrating. And then my family was afraid of me being 16 at the time, 17 when I left, that something like that might happen to me. And so some of our people had already gone to California. So we left Mississippi. I left, never to come back there to live again.
But you did come back.
Yeah, I came back.
What drew you back?
Well, I went to California, and a lot of good things happened to me. Went into the military, spent my time there, got married to Vera Mae, my girl from back home.
Still your lovely wife.
Right, and got and started a family, and a lot of good things happened to me. But in the midst of that, my son, some missionaries who had what they call good news clubs, where they would pick up children in the community, and they would have Bible classes in the homes in the community. And then they would try to get those children into a local church, and they would work with those families. And I didn't come from a church background. My wife did, but not me. And so they got my oldest son in there, and then his life was become so rated, and he was talking about things that I didn't even understand, but he was talking with it with so much joy. And then he invited me to go with him to Sunday school, and I went to really try to find out for myself what they was teaching me. I liked it. It wasn't like I was going to stop him from going, but I really wanted to find out for myself. Sure. And it was there in a little Bible class, for the first time in my life, I had heard that Jesus had died on the cross. I didn't realize he was God and all of that, but I'd heard he had died on the cross. But I had never heard that he had died for me, personal. He had died for the world, I imagine. And it was a little scripture that really brought it home to me. I think it's the greatest statement of the gospel. And Paul is talking about himself. He said something like in Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live. Yet not I, he says, but it's Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. See, growing up without a mother, growing up without a father, my drive in life was to be loved. I had not had love. And then I heard that this God
Loves you.
Loved me enough that he sent his only begotten son. And now I wouldn't give my son for nobody. That's some love.
Yes.
That's some love. And that was my beginning. And then after that, I began to think about how I had grew up and without having any Christianity having an impact on me. Oh, I had been to black congregations, and I'd heard them talking about dead people, and they'd be shouting on the floor. And I went by the big white churches, and I saw the big sign that would say, "Revival tonight, everybody's welcome." I knew if I'd have went there, it would have been a riot. So I did not pay that religion
attention.
And that's, I think, and so when I heard that, and of course in a new environment, I said, I'd like to come to know that God. And so over a period of months, I came to understand that this God had died for me. And then I felt this call to go back where I had not heard it. Where I had not heard it. And I made the assumption that it wasn't being heard, wasn't being preached. Of course, when I got back there,
you learned otherwise.
I discovered that was being preached. I hadn't heard it, but it wasn't made as plain as it could be made. And that was not the great emphasis. The great emphasis had turned it into just an art.
Right.
Just an art.
So
it is an art.
So you returned then to Mississippi at when the civil rights movement was really heating up, in Mississippi.
Right.
And this is the 50th anniversary of the Greensboro sit-in.
Right.
And there's a lot of publicity, of course, to that. But what were some of the most memorable parts of the whole civil rights movement that you were clearly a part of for a long period of time?
For the first 3 years, the civil rights movement heated up. It was going with murders going to Ole Miss early, then Medgar Evers getting killed early, 62, and then 63 the civil rights workers getting killed, and so all along it's heating up. But I think what helped me to internalize this whole thing, because I had this new religious hope, when I went back there. And I became friend of a white pastor in the town of Mendenhall. And that's the most difficult task for a person who's a superior to make friends with an inferior. That's the most important thing, because the culture is not designed to do that. And you can't make friends with people until you see something in that person that is a value of yours. That's why you want to be around them.
And you connect to them.
You connect it. And I think what happened, I think what broke through his prejudice, and back to me too, that I think I was the first black person that he had ever met that he thought understood the gospel as well as he. See, I had been discipled, and so I had understood the biblical foundation, the primary truths of the Bible. And so when we would be in conversation together, we would talk about it. You know how we would talk. You will say something that will spark a thought in me, and I say something that sparks a thought in you, and then you respect those sparks that are being. And so we became friends. And this is about the same time that poverty was being discovered. We had never given a systematic approach to eliminating poverty until 63, 64, in those periods. Sure. All of that is taking up place, and I was able to talk to this guy about what I was going to do in the town and the murders and stuff in the black community. Mm-hmm. They knew about that, and so he wanted to work with me. Mm-hmm. That was the thing that sparked. Had nothing to do with us integrating his church. Nothing to do. It was a matter of them. On
a personal level, you could work with him.
Yeah. So. And he wanted to do that. And he didn't see that as a threat. He went to his pulpit and began to prepare the people for some initiative. Mm-hmm. And the church so rejected him that he committed suicide.
Oh, my gosh.
That's when I could see that it wasn't just blacks that was being taken advantage of. whites themselves could not express love in that environment. They had taken this wonderful gospel and had so put it into their racial culture that the gospel had lost its power. They had a form of godliness that denied the power of God. Now that began me really to think about the damage. I think the reason I survived through all of that, and there's other reasons too, I think I saw a little of the depths of the problem. I think that we usually see, I think people give their life to causes that it's going to take a long time. Wilberforce, 40 years to abolish slavery in the British Empire. I think that, and so I think I gave my life to a cause, and then of course when I was beaten up in prison.
I wanted to ask you about that too. Yeah.
When I was beaten up in prison and tortured, torture is real in prison, and it's common in prison because we was tortured in that prison. And it was in that prison I saw the sort of like the demonic behavior of racism.
Now, how is it that here you are harassed, imprisoned, beaten, and yet you spend the rest of your life preaching reconciliation?
I think
how does that happen?
I think it happened because well, of course, in that jail at night, I made a promise to God. I want to get out of jail. I'm not joking with you. I really, when you get caught on a bind and you know God and love God, you're going to make Him promises. And so I said, but I really want to get out of jail. Yes. I said, God, if you will let me out of jail tonight, I want to preach a gospel that is stronger than my race. Because I could see the demon activity in those people. See, racism has a tribalism. They can't understand what went on in Rwanda. You can't understand that. You can't understand that. And I saw that activity in those people, and I saw the sickness of it. And I saw also our struggle for it was going to ignite that kind of demon activity. And then I think I didn't want to see anybody with that. Mm-hmm. Now, as soon as I got out of jail, I wanted to forget about it. I wanted to forget about it.
But you made a promise.
I made a promise. And God wouldn't allow me to get out of it. The redemptive part of it is I couldn't look at a policeman. You couldn't look at him when that happened. It sends chills. It's like when a siren come behind you.
Sure.
The little chills go through your body. I couldn't look at him. By this time I'd moved to Jackson, and I'd started some tent meetings in the community because the crime was so bad, and it was white and black. It was a community that was turning black, and whites were still in there. And I started having these meetings in the community. The white policeman who was in charge of the community saw this as something good, and he sent his policemen and people, and then he knew I was a leader, and he began to want to work with me. And I didn't want to look at him because he looked like those folks, but he outloved me.
Interesting.
He showed. See, that's the felt need concept. When somebody show a greater love for you around something that you see that you need, that's a pretty persuasive thing. And so it was him who helped the love that hate out of me. And that's what makes us love each other. But I think it's a big thing. I didn't want to hope that kind of demon activity upon the human race. I think that, and then incident, and then God began to give me these opportunities. I could talk a lot about when I moved to Jackson for Mendenhall, and I got together with these 7 white pastors. That was the first time that in Jackson that any black and white pastors had met together with the idea of doing something together that was going to meet human needs. And out of that then, And the people who now join those meetings we used to have, who joined those meetings, was the most successful businessmen who had sort of like international companies. And they was catching it when they would come to buy their boxes or whatever thing in Green Bay. They would catch it when these people say, "Why those dogs on those people? Yeah, right. Those people work for me. I got work." You know, why? So the businessman saw it,
economic value,
and then a businessman then has great impact, and that became have turned into almost a bit another ministry for me, because businessmen. Christians and preachers will make it spiritual and delay it. Businessmen, it works on the bottom line now. His financial statement is moving from month to month.
And he wants to make sure it's going to keep moving.
Right. And so business people have a more, and especially business Christian, that then becomes a sort of a holistic approach. Because he got a job, he got to make jobs, he got to sell his merchandise, and he eventually want to sell his merchandise to everybody.
Right.
Yeah. And so that became my. I want to give credit to where credit is. Of course, it's God, but it's God's working through people.
Sure.
That my life is lived in gratitude to people like that. My best friend in Jackson, one of my best friends in Jackson, is the sheriff of the county. He's an outstanding man, and he's white in a county that is 75% black, and he can't be beat.
Because he's a good man.
Right. He relates to me and his other workers, black folks, as human beings, and most people don't. People run against him all the time, and they don't know why he keep winning. They don't know why he's.
They should come and ask you.
That's right, because he's a human being. That's what makes this day so beautiful. That's what makes me being here at the college and seeing this new emerging people. I call them post-racist.
I want to ask you about that, but first I'm going to remind our viewers that you're watching Conversations from St. Norbert College. And our guest this evening is Dr. John Perkins, civil rights statesman and internationally known author on issues about racial reconciliation in Christian community. And our topic is social justice and Christianity. Again, we're very pleased to have you here. But let me ask you about that, because you said in a public talk that you gave on campus that you think we have an emergence of a new people. And you said it's both post-racist people and contaminated people.
Right.
That this is a new world all the way around. Talk with us about that. Explain what you mean.
Yeah. Well, let me come at it biblical, because we're talking about it in reality.
Mm-hmm.
I see these students. There is a passage that Paul is explaining conversion and what it means to be a Christian. He says something like, "If any person be in Christ, they are a new creation. The old has gone, and the new has come." And he keeps saying that in his epistle, forgetting those things are behind. Not forgetting them, but use them as memories of good. Mm-hmm. Forgetting those things are behind. And I persecuted the church. Forgetting those things are behind. Looking forward to those things that are before. If anyone be in Christ, is a new creature. Old things pass away, and behold, all things become new. We once knew Jesus in the flesh as a Jew. Mm-hmm. We don't know him anymore. And there's that new emerging of people. New emerging of people who don't think about race first. Who think about what they're going to do. They might even think about the environment first. They might think about the beach first. They might think about the snow first. They might think about skiing. They might think about... But the people who think about race first is bound, because there is no redemptive elements in racism. It's destructive. It's wasteful.
It's demonic.
And it's going to be white against white. I go to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I don't know who to hate. Right. I don't know how they know who to hate, because they're all white. I go to Africa. The Hutus are killing the Tutus. And that's racism. That's tribalism. That's my that's my tribe. What was the question now?
Well, the question is, what about, you talked about this emergence of a new people, and I think you went on to say that it is your belief that finally this new people is going to make the American dream finally possible.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible. But see, we have eliminated. I used it last night in order to remind people. We done eliminated, in trying to eliminate profiling, stereotyping. It's the N word now. You can't say that bad word.
No.
Nobody I meet today wants to be a racist. And even when we put that on people, it's like a curse.
Right.
It's like a curse. This generation won't put it on anybody. We've had these years now of athletic intermingling. We've had these years of the military is the perfect racial harmony institution we have, because the military had the power
To make
of
it
the
happen.
state to make it happen. They got a system. You respect the ranks,
Right.
and regardless of who in the ranks, you don't look at the color. You look at the bars. You look at the stripes. You look at that, and this generation is that generation. They got to be molded, but they got to be called out. They got to be called out. They got to be identified with the task, and they got to be identified with an issue. All great movement and all great evangelists has an issue. Evangelists, when you look at them, when they emerge and they come forth, there is something that's hurting society. It might be alcohol prohibition. It might be slavery. It might be the minimum wage. It might be health care. Yeah. That those people enter into the pain of the people. And that I think these people here has this humanity, and that we are bringing back that this human bears the mark of God in his dignity, human dignity. We call it equality, and athletic. When we mingle, we win and lose. Mm-hmm. That helps to bring us about equality. That's what makes sport. I was saying this morning, I said, you don't care what color the Packers. What y'all care is who win. Because we y'all own the Packers. You see, so that it's that, and this generation is ready to do that. And they got to be called out. They got to be taught. They got to be affirmed that they are God's people, and that God has commissioned them to do that. You got to do that. But I think
do you see that as your ministry, to call out?
I see that as my ministry. Yeah. It's a call out. Last night I could have got derailed in the question and answer, but I didn't want to get in an adult discussion. Right. The kids ain't concerned about that adult discussion. They're not concerned about whether or not we baptize them head down or back. They're not concerned about is Jesus on the cross or not on the cross, because that cross symbolized the great love that he had for us. You know what I'm saying? And so this generation, they're not concerned about this conservative, liberal, and all of that. They sort of see it deadlocked. They got more information than we got, right. And they can process more information than we have. This is a window of opportunity. God, he have set before us at this moment in history an open door. Our creed is there. People lack Americanism. It can be used now, very creative.
You said also publicly that you felt the most patriotic thing you can do is become a Christian.
Yes.
Explain that.
I think that's in America.
In America.
In America. I think that we had the creed, self-evident truth. Boy, that's powerful. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All of the nationalities and immigrants was coming. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Those are beautiful truths. We still would work for those. They still create emotion.
Yes,
my country tells of thee, sweet land of liberty. These are emotional, hopeful song. And if we can make that, that's what made Martin Luther King's speech so powerful. He said, I had a dream, anchored in the American dream. Anchored in the American dream. And so that's why I believe, I think we have, you got to develop a philosophy.
Yes.
You got to develop a creed in order to do something well. You got to have a purpose statement. We got it. We got it. And now we got a generation of people. And if we can tie that to human dignity, that when God said in the image of humanity, in the image of God created he them, that's near to it, that we can bear the image of God. And our Constitution affirm that.
Yes.
You know, so these are great. All Constitution don't affirm that.
No, they don't.
You know, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And really, we are going through a terrible time now of freedom of speech. This Super Bowl is going to be about, not so much about the Super Bowl this time.
It's going to be about freedom of speech.
It's going to be about freedom of speech. Yeah. We say what we want to say, you know, in society. Now, we need to take advantage of that. We can do it. We won't be locked in jail if we show love. That's what the civil rights movement, we survived because the people would pray. People would pray, and it was difficult. It was difficult. It erased the world when people kneel down to pray and they sick dogs on them. Yeah. And that was the key. You sick dogs on somebody praying. I mean, that radiates in our society.
That's an image that's not forgettable.
Right.
You are obviously a man of deep faith. That's clear. But you're also a man of deep hope. What makes you so hopeful? What makes you so sure that this is a better time and the future's going to be better?
Well, I judge, when I was doing my life, I have 8 children, and I judge when my kids got to be 10 and 11 years old, I would ask them, before I preached my sermon, I would tell them a little. Then I would always ask, and you get a couple of them, like one of my daughters or my son was more apt. You'd ask them about the sermon and what
take away from it.
What you take away from it, and they would usually tell you the truth. They would tell their daddy the truth because they want their daddy to be accurate.
Sure. They
brought their friends there, and they would tell you the truth. Now I got my grandchildren.
Who will tell you the truth.
They are absolutely loving. I mean, grandchildren love their grandparents deeper than they love their own parents. It is something about it. Grandparents don't say no.
That's true.
We might go through a process of delaying it. We might not have it right now.
But we're going to say.
but it's not going to be no.
Yeah.
You know, I said, I can't do it today, but honey, I'll do it next week. They'll come and remind me.
It was nice to see your grandson accompany you on this trip, too.
That is wonderful.
That is really nice.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Great
to formally thank our special guest, Dr. John Perkins, for sharing his expertise and his experiences with us this evening. Please join us for future programs as we continue our exploration of the world of ideas. And until then, I'm Michael Marsden for Conversations from St. Norbert College.